Good afternoon. Today I want to talk about electric cars. You all probably know about them, or heard about them at least. But today I want to talk about some advantages and disadvantages they might have. We all have heard electric vehicles are our best way so far to fight against pollution and CO2 emissions. And you probably also heard that electric cars are not good enough yet because of their insufficient autonomy, or because of the lack of charging points, or because the charge is very slow. And all that nowadays is sort of true, at least compared with the regular ICE cars. Let's start with the autonomy. For instance, a low-range petrol car like Seat Ibiza can have an autonomy close to 500 kilometers. Most low-range electric cars would have about half that, around 290 kilometers. And then only the most expensive and high or mid-range electric cars would get an autonomy around 500 or 600 kilometers tops. This would be the case of most Tesla cars. Now, talking about the charging points. And the situation is a little complicated. In the first place, for the regular ICE or petrol cars we're used to, we just need to go to a petrol station and fill in the tank, and that takes 5 minutes or less. Petrol stations are everywhere, and all cars can refuel in them. For electric cars, it's a little different. There are some charging stations which are just like regular petrol stations, but for electric cars. This means it's a place with several charging points where you can charge many cars. However, these stations for now are very few. I have actually never seen one myself, and I live in Barcelona. For example, there are some charging networks like Tesla superchargers or Ionity chargers that would be an example of these charging stations. What is more common are single charging points that we can find around the city. For example, in Barcelona there are many, but as I said, most of the time they are single points, which means you can charge 1 or 2 cars only. Also, there are some charging points at some supermarket car parks. Most of the time, around 10% of these supermarket car parks have special green spots, so electric car owners can charge their vehicles. Then, the last charging option, and the most interesting in my opinion, is having your own charger at home, in your garage, if you happen to have one, of course. This is a great option, not for everybody obviously, that can let you charge your car overnight, so you can always leave home with your car 100% charged, which for everyday city use would be much more convenient than a petrol car, since you would never need to go to a charging station unless you make a longer trip. Now let's talk about the charging times. And that is definitely a disadvantage compared with petrol cars, as the fastest charge you can get for an electric car is around 30 minutes if you were to charge it from 0 to 100 capacity. And this is the fastest. This would be the case for some Tesla cars, as they have the fastest charging speed. But for other cars, it can take longer than an hour to get it charged. For petrol cars, as I already mentioned, you can fill in the entire tank in around 5 minutes, no matter the model. So as for autonomy, usually electric cars are still worse than petrol cars, but sometimes they can be even better. This would be the case for instance, for someone who uses their car for everyday city commutes and has a charging point at home, or at work, or studying place. In this case, you can charge your car while you're not using it, and every time you get in it, it's 100% charged, so it would be like a never-ending battery. However, if we talk about road trips, then an electric car is usually a less convenient option, as there are fewer charging stations outside cities, and the charging times would delay the journey considerably. Anyways, that was only about the battery and mainly negative things. But there are advantages to electric cars too, of course. And here you have a list. Electric cars don't actually use an engine, but an electric motor, which most of the time is much smaller than an engine, which means there is more room inside the car. For this reason, sometimes electric cars have a double boot or trunk, the usual one at the back and an additional smaller one at the front, where you would usually find the engine in a petrol car. The same happens for the fuel. Electric cars use electricity as fuel, so they don't need petrol tanks. They do need extra room for the batteries, which of course are huge, but these are usually at the bottom of the car, inside the body. This means there is even more room inside the car that can be used for other purposes, such as having a larger boot, or just making interior more spacious. Next, electricity is for now cheaper than petrol, so even though electric cars are nowadays more expensive than petrol cars, in the long range they're worth it as you can save in fuel. Also, of course, electric cars don't emit CO2 gases nor any other gas. Of course, it doesn't mean they do not pollute our planet in other ways, because they do, mainly in the manufacturing process, but that's a topic for another speech. The thing is, if we talk strictly about CO2 emissions and toxic gas emissions while using the car, there are none. So electric cars are great, at least for those who live in cities and for their health. The last advantage I want to talk about can actually be considered both as positive and negative. But the thing is, electric cars make no noise, as most of the noise a car makes comes from the engine. Since electric motors are noiseless, electric cars make a huge contribution to reduce noise pollution, which is a huge problem in some big cities. On the other side, since we're all used to hear cars coming, it is common that people get distracted and don't look before crossing a street and risk getting run over. This can be a problem, especially nowadays, that everybody is paying more attention to their phones than to their surroundings. And that would be it for the advantages and for my speech. Thank you.